Dumelang. My name is Mpho Ashley Motene, for anyone who might have missed that. I'm an industrial-organisational psychologist and also the founder of TSHOLETSANANG Afrika. And what an encouragement it is for me to be able to join you today, especially because we are leaning into very hard narratives and things that we should continue to talk about but respond to with action as it relates to women. And there's no doubt that the panel is a fantastic one. The topics are really going to challenge your mind. And even today, what I'm wanting to lean into is the socioeconomic inclusion of women. And it's really coming from a place of noticing how much women have been excluded, even though they have done so much. As a young woman, today I'm standing on a strong but often silenced history of women all around the world. And this really is a history of, particularly in Africa, women having to work too hard to draw meaningful work and progressive life experiences. You know, it often feels like we're living in a state of protest for social justice and hope for a better Africa for women, and it's exhausting, but at the same time we can't give up until things really start to look that much better. Society is changing, we're going to hear about that. But one of the things that I'm also thinking about is, you know, can we truly have a celebration of women, a lasting celebration of women without intentional representation of women in all industries and roles? And more importantly, in ways that lead to a better quality of life socioeconomically, because that is the progress game changer. Honestly, that is what changes the game. You know, those are the kind of opportunities that I want to be able to share with the young people that I work with through my career mentoring and well-being initiative, being TSHOLETSANANG Afrika, as I support their skills development and career journeys, as I partner with organizations that are doing that in communities as well, you know. Secondly, as well, what is the quality of the opportunities currently available to women in Africa, you know, for leading that better quality of life that we hear about everywhere? You know, it has to do with dignified work. It has to do with income generation in ways that lead to true financial freedom, so that women can be the ones who choose which aspects of their lives they can empower and they can uplift, you know, and their families and communities, instead of having minimal resources imposed or strategies imposed on women. You know, these are some of the hard questions that can be responded to with action. And especially we have seen when it is done well, it really looks amazing. And honestly, it falls back on the roles that women generationally have played in Africa. It has always been to the benefit of nations. It always has a collective well-being benefit to it. And this applies all around the world, wherever women choose to go and how they choose to work. Even when it's not recorded in history, or even when the efforts of women are not captured in their fullness, doesn't mean that it is not happening. I recently watched Madame C.J. Walker's miniseries, and it's inspirational but doesn't even capture the full story. How is it that movies like Poppy Nongena are only catching traction now? How is it that we do not know about her story in its fullness? And how is it that the work of real queens and empresses in Africa who have lived, and women in activism and in all roles of society, has been forgotten? You know, Jana Ngcobo has written quite an insightful article about this, forgotten history and exclusion amnesia when it comes to women. You know, I've given my daughters names from other African countries because representation matters, and I want them to remember that when they say their names, even when they explain the meaning behind their names, where they explain why things are the way they are, or even why the opportunities that they want are worth being funded or supported, because they matter as people, you know, they matter as human beings. But I still wonder, will they be getting bursts of this history on Twitter like we're reading, instead of in the classroom? If we are saying we're decolonizing things, will they still be hearing about these things in webinars, instead of this being part of the family conversations under the trees? That is the question I have when it comes to the girl child sometimes. But have we perhaps gotten used to African women doing a lot with too little, and then marveling at that broken narrative because she does amazingly and exceeds our expectations given the odds stacked against her. The women in my life have always been my case studies, living case studies that have grown me in many ways, you know. And I can confidently say that I am the psychologist that I am, and the activism work that I'm into, and, you know, even the career mentoring and writer that I am for social enterprising hopes by night, because I'm better heard, you know, today than even they were. So my mother was a domestic worker by day, brilliant entrepreneur by night. Yet that's a title that's not always afforded to her. Those are not the parts people choose to remember about her. She sewed, she made extra money selling ditlo. Leader church, created about 4 socioeconomic inclusive stokvels with her sister. I'm talking about a network of stokvels. And this speaks into the work that women can do in communities in powerful ways. You know, there's a secondary, unseen, informal economy and community of helpers and gardeners in suburbs, you know, by the way, and amazing work comes from that. Are we recognizing the efforts of women, regardless of her level of education, regardless of the opportunities we have not given her, you know, because I feel like their influence was felt. Even my grandmother, you know, her influence was felt in ways that were a bit too quiet and hidden. She was enterprising. She caught, prepped, sold mobani worms by the sack, 50 kg sacks to agricultural corporations and marketplaces and tourists. No phone, no internet or website or degree, but partnering with other women, they built their communities socioeconomically by hand. And the villagers still don't have electricity, you know, where she was working and living, even though she lived to see 100, but never saw the overseas that her mobani worms flew to, you know. And they were the women that they were, even though they were excluded for being a certain way, or excluded from being the woman they really wanted to be, doing a lot with limited funding, not enough support, and also without working in ways that they wanted, which is probably not as hard, you know, probably wanting to rest more than they could afford to. And that really is the plight. It really feels like it's a generational quest for representation, but also a quest against misrepresentation or minimalization of what women have been doing. So for me, I find that 2020 is enlightening. You know, is a pandemic, what it will take to shift economic gridlocks and structures that perpetuate the exclusion of women. You know, post-COVID, we are excited about that world, but will it be a world that includes women even more? You know, from her God-given talents to what she's doing in her family, to what she's doing in the marketplace or the workplace, or what she's doing in her community. One of the questions that I am seeing from our panel really has to do with, you know, what does peace of mind even look like for women when we are surrounded by so much violation? And for me, it really has to do with, you know, how often will a woman's existence and effort only begin to matter when what she is doing is perhaps breaking her, or what is happening to her is breaking her, because she's either working, protesting, negotiating 3 times harder than she needs to be, just to be seen as valuable. It's disheartening for me when I read reports by the World Health Organization that speak about gender and mental health around the world, to read things like the social aspects of our societies are such that psychosocially, women all around the world, and especially in developing economies like what we see in Africa, are either overtreated or undertreated for mental health challenges. And I'm talking about things like stress, depression, anxiety, burnouts. Those are coming up as tops, and burdens of care that are linked to gender inequality and the duality of roles. And it's not just dual roles, it's multiple roles. But in essence, none of us can live peacefully in a world where a woman gets more attention in a headline for being raped or murdered as a 2-year-old, or as a 32-year-old like my cousin, or even an 82-year-old woman, but gets less attention in her home, or in the policies that parliaments are passing without allocating proper resources that are not squandered, or when she gets less attention at a police station trying to report a matter, or when running away in the case of ukutwala or forced polygamy, and then being brought back into family interventions that favor abusive men more than the violated women and children. You know, Team Begazela just comes to mind, for example. But how does one heal psychologically or psychosocially from exclusion over generations and violation for simply being a woman? I think it's important that we create space for women to work and live, but also be well enough to work with free access to, firstly, counseling, so they can heal from exclusion and violation and be able to refuel. That's where hashtag wellbeing relived fits in for me. Coaching, to be able to sharpen the skills or even relearn the skills that have been sidelined for far too long, and to comfortably and confidently be in that growth mindset, to be able to do all the things that women choose to do. And collaboration, you know, we need enterprising partnerships and resource streams that make sense and are sensible. And women can still decide if that really is the type of funding or support that works, not just thrown at women, because that's then a mockery to the efforts of women. And especially at a community level, what does community support look like? It definitely does not have to do with the underrepresentation that we see. It has to do with partnership that is intentional and meaningful. You know, underrepresentation is what perpetuates the inequality against women. And it says a lot about mixed messaging, even for the girl child, because I'm seeing another question there about what are we doing to empower the girl child who follows after us in the future? You know, how is it that girls would form a majority of children and youth in schools, in societies, and even as graduates, yet be underrepresented as women in the workplace, in business, in leadership, economically, in shareholding, in access to education, in funding, and even in mental health support? Our working, like, can it not be that we are normalizing things like she will be celebrated in 1 month but not respected enough all other months? Or that she's part of a team but is not listened to or paid equitably or even allowed to transform a workplace in peace without resistance to the changes that she's bringing. Good changes usually. Or that she's educated but not funded. That she's encouraged to be a mother but discouraged from assuming leadership roles or starting new things or continuing with studies because she is a mother or a teen mother, more so. That she can protest but will still not be accepted in a dignified way. So we can definitely empower the girl child by listening to her, responding to what she really needs, and supporting her as a valuable human being. You know, we can empower the boy child too to do the same and stand stronger in respecting a woman and sharing space and opportunities. You know, and what is it that you and I are doing with our voice and our power to ensure that women have access to quality education and funding that isn't a mockery? You know, so promote and support women in their chosen roles, support their businesses and initiatives. We need to stop thinking of it as she's keeping herself busy or it's a hobby, you know, but it really starts with the woman in your family. Are you paying attention to the things that interest them and the things that they are busy with? Or are you just scrolling past that like we see in social media? If you cannot buy or support, at least more than anything promote what you are seeing women doing. That is a true celebration of women. And honestly, unless resources are more freely accessible in ways that they should always have been accessible, so that we don't even have the situation of gender gaps and parity and asking for inclusion in 2020, and even having to ride off the coattails of a pandemic and hoping that post-COVID things will be better. No, I don't think any nation can truly thrive if it has not included women intentionally and meaningfully. And it has to be to the benefit of women, you know, not out of pity for women.